It's time for The World This Week. 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour with us. Pierre Hasky, co-founder of the news website Rue 89, 89th Street, I guess you would.
You can say that. Hello.
Also joining us, radio and newspaper freelance Paris correspondent Catherine Field.
Good evening.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you as well, Cynthia Cardoso of the Brazilian, do we say the Brazilian or the Portuguese language section?
Well, Brazilian newsroom, let's say.
The Brazilian newsroom.
Yeah, because we actually have a Portuguese
sister
for
station,
Africa.
Radio France International. And as well, Douglas Herbert of France 24 fame. Thank you for being with us. The World This Week, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, hashtag TWTW. Umbrellas have become its signature. The heart of Hong Kong, the scene of China's biggest pro-democracy protests since Tiananmen Square back in 1989. And you might say it's been a roller coaster week. It's been peaceful most of the time, sometimes tense. On Friday, just when it seemed the movement might fade, with the embattled chief executive promising a meeting with student leaders, well, scuffles breaking out, and authorities warning they won't budge.
I think this action is affecting the emergency services. It's creating anarchy in Hong Kong. I won't consider the use of the police force to clear the area in the short term. But this cannot continue for a long time.
Catherine Field, we've heard these rumblings throughout the week in the official press in Beijing. Did we hear him just say everybody out of the pool?
I think that's the way he's going. We had an announcement a couple of hours ago also giving the sort of a couple of points as to who's got to go home and what's got to happen. Clearly, they were thinking they could have a waiting game, that everyone would lose interest, that they would all start dribbling away and everyone would go home. That hasn't happened. To be really brief, I think they've got 4 options, and I'll be really brief. One is a Tiananmen option, which everyone hopes they won't do. Second is that it does just fizzle out. They go home. The protesters tell everyone to go home and tell the government, look, you can see how many people we can bring out on the street. We'll come back if you don't talk to us sensibly. Or the last option, which is also just as bad, that the police go back with the pepper spray and the tear gas and clear the area.
Pierre Hasky?
Well, it's a very confusing situation just now, because the youth have made an incredible show of strength, you know. And the most remarkable aspect of it is that the leader, Joshua Wong, he's 17. 17 is exactly the time that Hong Kong has been under Chinese sovereignty. That means the integration of Hong Kong into the Chinese political mold has failed because the youth is refusing it. And Joshua Wong started his political involvement 2 years ago when they started patriotic classes in school. And that was the beginning of the awakening of that generation. So that's a very important landmark in this evolution of Hong Kong. But politically, they are in a dead end, because the Beijing government is not going to accept any of their demands, because if they accept universal suffrage and 100% democracy for Hong Kong, then you're going to have Tibet, you're going to have Xinjiang, and one day the whole of China, and that's unacceptable. So where is it going? Is it going to confrontation, or spoilers coming to ruin the game like they started doing today? People saying, oh, we want to work, we are obeying citizens, and we want to go to work, and we start clashes. One way or another, I think this stage of the fight is probably going to be a failure for the youth, but they've made a very strong point.
So they've made a strong point. Catherine was putting up the option, the worst case scenario, which is we see a lot of clashes in the city center, and Hong Kong is a narrow city center.
I don't believe really in the Tiananmen option. That means sending tanks into the crowds. That's probably not going to happen. But getting Hong Kong people one against the other, trying to bring the pro-government against the youth, which has been very, very peaceful until now, is really on the table, and that's probably the best way to discredit the whole movement. That to show, okay, these are hooligans, these are people who are bringing chaos in a peaceful, prosperous city. We have to stop that.
I think also, though, we've got some older people within the movement who've always been there, even under the British time. Right. People like Emily Lau, who's in LegCo. You've got Martin Lee, who's a barrister. You've all got Lee Chuk-yan, who has given his entire career to helping workers' rights. So these are people who've been around in Hong Kong for a long time, and no matter how this demonstration ends, they are still going to be there. They're still going to be banging on the doors saying, Hong Kong is a very, if you like, socially aware community. It's very different from China in the respect that you have a real community feel in Hong Kong. And these are people who are prepared to go and bat for Hong Kong as a community, a separate community from China that feels Chinese, but is really perfectly capable of running its own show.
It really is night and day. I mean, I went to Hong Kong for the first time right on the eve of the handover in 1997, and I think anyone who has been to Hong Kong, even more recently than that, will be struck by the absolute dichotomy in the cultures. There is such a cultural split economically, culturally, socially, politically between the territory of Hong Kong and when you go to the mainland. You literally felt at the time you were entering a whole different, it was forged at a different crucible. The mentality of the people in both areas, mainland and in Hong Kong, is extremely different. And we were saying this new generation has only grown up really under the Chinese rule, post-handover, the Joshua Wongs. It's amazing that even given that, they have remained very much forged in that unique Hong Kong culture, and never the twain shall meet, the mainland China and the territory.
All right, you're both mentioning here Joshua Wong. He's one of the faces in the crowd in this movement.
We hope the government can give us a timetable for this meeting as soon as possible. I believe this isn't just another official meeting. We're not here demanding that sort of meeting.
Wong, still a teenager, formidable orator, single child of an Anglican middle-class family whose activism started as Pierre was saying, at the ripe old age of 14. He started a movement to help thwart plans to introduce civic patriotism that the government wanted to introduce in school. And by the way, that worked, Cynthia Cardoso. So when you look at what's going on this week.
Exactly. When I look at this, I look at also the protesters we had in Brazil last year, when you have in Turkey. So we have this feeling that it's a kind of a global wave of youth that they, of course, protesting. Of course, different angles. In China, they want more democracy. In Brazil, we already have democracy, but we have this kind of wave amidst youth claiming, and this, I think, it's a phenomenon that's going to stay, and it's going to stay longer. And according to the future in Hong Kong, I think it's also going to depend how the rest of the society is going to cope with these claims. I think this movement can come to stay.
All right, lots of reactions coming in. One from Andres on Facebook. China wants to annex Hong Kong under only one system. Of course, that's a reference to the old adage that's been there since it was handed back from the British, which is one nation, two systems.
One country, two systems.
One country, two
systems, yes. That was the Deng Xiaoping, Maggie Thatcher agreement.
And is that agreement going to stand? Are they going to be at least able, with what's going on, to preserve what they have?
Certainly, if it goes bad and they use force on the street, that's the end of one country, two systems. If they treat the Hong Kong people exactly the same way as they treat the people in China, one country, two systems will be finished, and they will have lost all their credibility for that particular system. You cannot have Hong Kong as part of China. It's so completely different, as Douglas was saying, that it can be. They've got this British legacy of a different type of education system, a different type of view of the world, and that will always be.
And I think one of the issues is that the reason for this movement at the moment is that the people of Hong Kong felt that the system was being preserved, but it was being eroded. Justice was less independent, the press freedom was less respected, the police behavior, everything was going down in terms of what they used, the standards they used to have. And so the risk is not so much that they will put an end to the one country, two system, but that in effect it will be an empty slogan and not the reality. One last point about Joshua Wong. In the images you showed, he was speaking Cantonese. And that's a very important point, because Cantonese used to be the dominant language under British rule among the Chinese people of Hong Kong. And since the handover, Mandarin has been going up, Mandarin being the official language of the People's Republic. And so the fact that he addresses the crowds in the streets in Cantonese is a really affirmation of the identity of Hong Kong.
And C.Y. Leung, I'll just point out, in his inauguration speech, he spoke in Mandarin.
Yes.
And to me, that's very significant. I mean, it showed from day one that he was essentially under the thumb, if not just a puppet of Beijing.
Beijing's man, yeah.
You know.
Well, that's why he got the job.
That's why he got the job, presumably, yeah.
No, he didn't get the job because he was going to stand up for Hong Kong. He was going to say yes at the right time. When Beijing said jump, he was going to say how high.
All right, another reaction coming in from William. It won't end well. China will not bend to what it sees as a wayward territory. Tiananmen is about to repeat itself. Of course, our panel is disagreeing to agree with that. Two questions. One, Joshua Wong. Remember, when there were huge student protests in the 1960s here in France, there was an 18-year-old who became emblematic. He was named Daniel Cohn-Bendit, then go on to be a mainstay of the European Parliament. Joshua Wong, is it the same sort of phenomenon?
In an open country, Joshua Wong would have the same kind of evolution. He would be a member of parliament, maybe a cabinet minister in one government, but we're not in a reasonable open country. So Joshua Wong's fate is either to stay and shut up because he's gone very far, or maybe go in exile. And that's the sad reality of that country, where so many people look at the leaders of the Tiananmen movement, 1989. Most of them are in the US or in Europe.
The other issue that we're broaching here is Hong Kong's role. Catherine, I guess that we could call this the "This Is Your Life" segment of the show, because you were based in Hong Kong back in 1997. When there was the handover.
Yes, I stood on HMS Tamar and watched the Union flag come down and saw the Royal Yacht Britannia sail off with Chris Patton, the Prince of Wales.
At the time, 1997, China needed Hong Kong as its gateway to the outside world. Does it still need it?
It does still need it because it's important for China to get Taiwan back. So they've got to keep having a little olive leaf out there to say to Taiwan, listen, it's going to be okay. You know, this one country, two systems. You can all come back into the motherland. It needs it for that. It doesn't need it as much in terms of finance, because obviously Shanghai, Guangzhou, these other areas are coming up financially. But really, for its respectability, it's got to be responsible on Hong Kong.
And did you think that 17 years on, we would still have a similar status quo to what we had in 97?
Oh, absolutely. 17 years ago, you had the flood of middle-class Hong Kongers moving to Canada, moving to Britain, moving to America. No one had trust then. No one has trust now. I mean, I remember a really moving story I did just a couple of months before the Hong Kong handover of Hong Kong Chinese families with disabled children who were leaving their disabled children in orphanages in Hong Kong so they could get passports to go to Canada. And people were scared.
You know, the big question in 1997 was whether China would influence Hong Kong or whether Hong Kong would influence China, in the sense that would the Hong Kong model bring China to more openness and democracy, or would the Communist Party system take over progressively Hong Kong? And the game is not over, because Hong Kong has had a lot of influence also on China. For example, one small thing, philanthropy. You had Hong Kong is full of big fortunes who are involved in philanthropy, foundations, and so on. It's coming to China. It has influenced the rich people, the wealthy class in Beijing and Shanghai. And on the spread of information, it's coming from Hong Kong. It's spreading through the web. It's even with censorship. All the people in Guangdong, the neighboring province, they have access to TV programs from Hong Kong. So there is this interaction, and the game is not over.
That's interesting, that point about how people are interacting. Just one comment for us from Erica on Facebook. She's saying, do you know the majority of Hong Kongese are getting angry and fed up with the students irrational protest claims. So not everybody a fan of the protest. But you were mentioning this digital movement. Let me put this to you, Douglas Herbert.
Fire chat.
Everybody's talking about this, which is, let's say it here, the brainchild of a Frenchman, right?
Yeah, we have to say that, right? I think he went to Hong Kong too. I think, right?
Yes, he was
promoted a little bit.
But it seems every time
but-
we have Cynthia, you were mentioning that whether it's Istanbul, one day it's Brazil. It seems though every time we're getting a new social medium.
And just to remind people, what it is, because the internet networks, the social networks, they've been really disrupted. It's been almost impossible to communicate for a lot of these students, even if they're within several hundred yards of each other in a big mass of people. Fire chat is basically an application which allows them to communicate over very short distances via Bluetooth. So essentially, you could say that in a sense it's galvanizing, or it's enabling in many ways this movement and these masses of people to somehow coordinate. Because let's not forget, this movement, grew sort of organically. It's very disparate. Not everyone, it's not one monolithic lump. They think differently, and it does require coordination. And even now, there's differences in how they should, strategize looking ahead. But there's definitely a case to be made, and it's obvious, the technology doesn't determine the outcome of the revolutions, but it definitely can become a facilitator and a galvanizer in times when otherwise they would have no way of communicating with each other.
Would you say that Hong Kong was outside of the Great Firewall of China, since there are people there? I know that Facebook is very prevalent there, which is not on the rest of the mainland.
Yes, the internet is free in Hong Kong, and all the websites like Facebook or Twitter that are blocked on the mainland China are available in Hong Kong. But the main fear here, and that's where FireChat is brought in, is that they would cut internet or telecom communications, the way the Egyptians did during the uprising against Mubarak, and then you would have this movement without capacity to communicate. And they've been relying a lot on technology. They have these Google Docs where people volunteer to pick up the trash, to bring water. It's amazing how they use the technology. Now, even if the Chinese government wants to cut off internet and telco, they would still be able to communicate via, and I'm sure they've had, I think the range is about 70 meters. Yeah. If you have people every 70 meters, you can communicate on the whole city through relays like that, and give information, give instructions, and that's an amazing tool, which was invented, I hear, for people who are in big stadiums where the network is saturated, or in big concerts, and all of a sudden it comes back in a revolution. Right. This is quite the irony of technology.
A new use discovered in the former British colony of Hong Kong. Stay with us. There's much more to come in the world this week, including our look at the upcoming presidential elections in Brazil. Stay with us.